All right. Well, first of all, happy World Rainforest Day to everyone. This is our 7th year celebrating World Rainforest Day, June 22nd. I know it's still the 21st for some of us. It's already the 22nd for others. When we first started World Rainforest Day in 2017, our goal was to raise awareness for why rainforests are important. We wanted to invite, engage, and activate ever-increasing numbers of people around the world in first learning about tropical rainforests, and then knowing why they're important and what role they play in maintaining our planetary systems, as we were hearing in the first panel. Planetary systems and health. That was several years ago. In that first year, we had 29 organizations that partnered with us across all 6 populated continents. And it began this collaborative process across all these rainforest conservation organizations and many who just plain support rainforest protection. So why is it just as important, if not just as important, far more important today? We all know how beautiful, amazing, magical rainforest ecosystems are. They're complex. We know they're so threatened. We know all the statistics. The majority of people here today, we know. And why is it that in my lifetime, we've lost half our rainforests and we still continue going to this precipice, as it were? We know that we need to keep standing forests standing while renewable energy and negative carbon technology comes to scale. There is no other way unless we do what we must for standing forests. We know the most effective work, and there are enough studies that show us, is working with indigenous and local communities. This is what many of us here do today. You know, there are enough bodies that say that 70 to 80% of world's biodiversity is actually protected by indigenous peoples. So we know all this. So as we started year after year, inviting people, collaborating with people for World Rainforest Day, 3 years ago, we started a global summit. And one of the things we started hearing by about 3 years ago was, will you convene us? Will you bring us together? Well, what happens when you just bring together rainforest conservation organizations for World Rainforest Day? You know, this is where we want to activate everybody else. Well, what about all of us who do this work every day, for whom every day is World Rainforest Day? And what became really obvious when we look at some of the largest problems facing us in keeping our standing forests standing and really helping the communities and the guardians, the frontline communities that are actually doing the stewarding and protecting of these forests. We knew what some of those issues and problems were, and that would require a different way. And that different way had to be a bunch of us who do this work every day, who've seen the trajectory and who have seen the mismatch. And when we talk about mismatch, what does that mean? The mismatch is there are the solutions out there. The communities are ready to do the work. There's the funding that's out there. There's technology out there. So what's missing? This is who we are as Rainforest Collective. Several of us organizations who've come together to say, what do we need to do? And so I want to introduce you to this wonderful panel here, Jon Bruno, who is an expert in tourism finance and actually finance overall and sustainable development over decades, working with ecotourism initiatives with the smallest scale to national levels across the globe. And he literally works all over the world. We have Barbara Vallarino, an incredible leader in community-driven conservation in Mexico and Central America. She brings her legal background and direct work and the fact that she is from a Central American country. to her work every day. Topher White, who's a technologist, who has actually built field technology and who has helped create, take field technology and use of AI in forest conservation that actually has resulted, in my opinion, the largest biodiversity data set in the world. That's pretty incredible. And then we have Jose Valdivieso. I've known Jose the longest. He's an implementer of large-scale sustainable development projects. And I personally know about his work, working. He's done many, many amazing things, and I can tell you many things. But working with 70,000 cacao producers in forest areas across Ecuador, doing it well enough such that it placed Ecuador over a 3-year period as the largest producer of cacao, but doing it sustainably. Because if you don't have the forest, you do not get the highest levels of cacao. Aroma comes from Ecuador and Peru in the cacao, and it only comes when it grows within the forest. So here we've gathered, there's a lot of work this group has been doing, and what I want to do is I want to invite this panel to talk about our experiences. And I want to really start with Barbara. And you've dealt with a lot of small donors and funders, and I would love to have you discuss the kind of systemic problems that you have come across, and what is it that brings you to spend your time, effort, passion, very limited time, each of us has, to Rainforest Collective. Welcome, Barbara.
Sure. Thank you so much, Niyanta, and thank you to all my fellow panelists. It's really an honor to be here with you celebrating World Rainforest Day and to get the opportunity to share what we've been cooking up and thinking about for a while now. So yeah, my organization, Ecologic, we work directly with over 350 community-based organizations at the moment in our efforts to conserve forests in Mexico and Central America. And over 30 years, trying to raise support, financial support, and for those efforts, we've certainly seen that the system in which we operate doesn't necessarily align well with the values of indigenous peoples and local communities. And I would like to see a lot more funding go directly to these efforts. And I think, there's certain barriers that exist. For example, language, something as simple as language. Most of the funders that we deal with, in my experience, do not accept proposals in Spanish or in languages other than English. Very few do, and I so congratulate the ones that do. But that right there, is a barrier. I think reporting requirements oftentimes are quite onerous and mismatched, to use your word, Niyanta, with, again, the cosmovision of indigenous communities vis-a-vis nature. One example, some of our partner communities give their in-kind labor towards conservation projects as in-kind matching for some of the funding. It's work that they do already because it's what inspires them. It's what their culture is around monitoring conservation. But we've had funders who have requested timesheets, for example, to give evidence that this is happening. And we've had to mediate between the funders and the communities to find a solution that, timesheets is just not going to work. So to mediate there between what was needed and what the communities felt was respectful of their effort. Something as simple as requiring the 501c3 status that also, sometimes leaves out on the ground communities. So these are some of the challenges and obstacles that we've seen in our experience. And Yeah, as an individual organization, we've worked for 30 years to build local capacity, to allow our local partners to access funding directly. Some donors have been very progressive and generous and open-minded and have evolved to make that happen, and I'm very, very proud of that. And to act as an intermediary where where it's needed and it's going to make impact. But I think the reason that I have decided to put my time and effort into the Rainforest Collective is, how do we scale up those efforts? How do we come together to amplify and scale up and rethink the system to some degree, so that we can respond to the urgency of the moment, which we can't necessarily do as individual organizations doing great work, but really how do we leverage our collective knowledge, impact, networks, connections, to respond to the moment that we're in, and to really support local communities in their impactful efforts.
Thank you so much, Barbara. You speak, I imagine that several folks in the audience would be sort of nodding. All of us here can nod in sort of saying, yes. Think about it, indigenous communities who are not going and doing 9-to-5 work, who are not working in offices. It's a very different rhythm, and we're expecting them to fill in timesheets. I mean, where do you start with a concept of timesheets? If you really think for a moment, it makes no logical sense. First of all, we're already imposing our ways of doing something, forgetting that the communities are doing work not just for themselves, but for all of us. And if it weren't for all of us, they wouldn't have to do this work regardless, right? They would just be willing to coexist and do it on their terms. And if you think about communities, so I don't want to talk about that. I want to bring in Jose. Jose, you've been working in Ecuador, which is where you're from, for over 30 years. You've worked with thousands of producers, scores of organizations. Will you describe what it's like dealing with governments and funding? And can you see some of the discrepancies between sort of the existence of this large-scale institutional funding and the realities of NGOs and communities on the ground? And then also, why, if you can just fold in your answer, why are you, choosing to spend your time and effort towards a collective? Because really, time is our most valuable, non-renewable resource, and we have chosen to spend time to create something together. Oh, Jose, you're on mute. Oh, your mic may not be working. No, your mic's not working. No. While you're figuring it out, can I go to Topher? May I do that? May I go to Topher while we'll figure out how to, can you try? Are you talking?
I think it's your volume, Jose, because you can hear you a little bit.
And you're still on mute. Oh, it's very low.
Is it even a panel if that doesn't happen once, right?
Okay, while you're doing that, I'm going to go to Topher, okay?
Cool. Now you're muted, Niyanta.
You're a technologist, Topher, and you've worked at community levels. Will you talk about technology pathways for new funding? Will you talk about, what does technology, what's the role that technology plays in the work we do, and how does it both help and distract? If you can focus on that, I think that would be really, really helpful. And then if you can talk about why you're putting your time and energy in building building the collective, this very collaborative effort.
Sure. I mean, technology is like so viral, especially in all these places that on the ground, right? It's one of these things that so many people have access to. These are not these very rural communities, but they have access to all the same tools that we are, so familiar with, and they rely upon them, and we rely upon them. So, like in many ways, even for building very new high-tech tools, trying to gather the most we can from these places, building tools to help them do their work. Ultimately, we do rely upon them on the ground to actually have an impact. And so I'd say that at the end of the day, technology is one of the best unifiers with people there, not just to the rest of the world, but there on the ground as well. But at the same time, and this is coming from somebody who's loved to work in these spaces and really sees great potential in all that's possible there. Technology is an easier thing in many cases to fund from our side of the pond to compare to people there on the ground. And it's one of those things that can be funded in spurts, as opposed to this like long ongoing funding that you need for people there on the ground. The thing about technology is it always offers this promise of like top-down global solutions that over the years, while I do still hold out hope that those exist, the only thing we've really been able to prove globally is that conservation is like a vocation. There's no such thing as like global conservation so much as there is like, on the ground. All conservation is ultimately local. It requires local people to be there, to think towards the next generation, to constantly like adopt it. And that's where technology can of course come to, in many cases, a reward, but it also distract, right? So there's this fine balance between people really appreciating and sticking around for multiple generations in an area to protect it, and also getting access to the entire world and seeing what's out there to pull them away from those places. But ultimately, if we think about celebrating those people, using tech to do it, and also being able to use people and leverage people for what they are best at, which is decision-making, proactivity, and responsibility. And technology can take a lot of the busy work that we so often associated with people in these remote places, such as monitoring patrols, and allow them to do the really intelligent work that we need people to do.
Topher, that's all well said, because we often think that technology replaces the actual real work on the ground, that it's the all-in solution, which we know it isn't, right? There's no level of AI that's going to replace indigenous knowledge, nor actually do the intelligent, bring the wisdom as you talk about. We can help in ways, take out some of the grunt work perhaps. So it's very lovely to hear that from a technologist, right? And when you talk about this side of the pond, you're actually talking about sort of the US, European, or from the larger cities in the rainforest countries itself, right? Mm-hmm. Jose, shall we try you now? Did you talk about why before we try, Jose? Did you say, Topher, why
yes.
you want to be part of the...
It works?
It works. I will come back to you.
No, it's working. Okay, perfect.
You know the question, and so answer away, Jose. Unless you want me to ask you again.
No, it's okay. Yes, I've been working for the last 3 years trying to find out how to synchronize the resources of the NGOs, the governments, and the people who's outside, who's in the field, the company, the industry. Because if we work all together, it will be easier. The problem when you come to the government, it happens the same almost with the huge companies. They have a lot of the resources, and they want to make something in the field. But it's very hard to do it if there's no tools to do it. I think Rainforest Collective is one of the biggest tools is going to be implemented in the field, because we can make a lot of changes because we have a lot of information. Like Niyanta was saying, we have all the system. It was Topher talking about technology. Now we have AI. It's very important because when you're talking about so many people, so many souls in the field, that you have to work with them, 100,000 persons, 200 persons, cities, because it changed. Because when you're talking about resources, more difficult is to be in the field. Then you need a lot of technology to do it. And we've been doing all the time to try to make a better systems of conservation, to maintain better the forest, to maintain better the rivers, the people who live there. That is very important. And but you have to put in synchronize everything, because even if it works once, that doesn't mean that you leave and it's still working. Then you have to be sure that it will still working. And I would say Rainforest Collective, if you have some tools that they're looking over all the time and taking advantage of all these tools that you have in the system, the resources of the governments, that they almost infinite. In the past, there was no resources. It was only very difficult to get resources for Latin America, for Africa, for Europe, for the United States. But now you have a lot of resources, but you have only a few groups that are taking the advantage to work. And I will say the world needs a lot of people like you here to help the community. We need it. And most of the time that happen everywhere, even in school. When you go to high school, to university, there's only 3 hands that raise all the time. Look, me. But the system is a lot of people wants to raise a hand. And I think it's the time to raise a hand and say, look, let's do it. Because they want to do it, the government wants to do it, the company wants to do it, everybody wants to do it. And it's going to solve, I think, Rainforest Collective is going to solve a lot of these things and all of these fears and start making the things done.
So that was really lovely, Jose, because you're talking about the pathway, which actually segues quite beautifully into what, John, I want you to talk about. It's almost like what Jose is already talking about is the solutions, but I still want you to talk about your own experiences, both from what doesn't work and when it does work. And you and I started these conversations very early on. Why do this? You often talk about who's going to roll up the sleeves and do this work. So, to you.
Thank you, Niyanta. First, to echo Barbara's sentiment, it is a great honor to present with my friends and colleagues, to the folks that are here today. It all starts with conservation. I think everyone is gathered because we really understand the need to protect this very fragile thing that we haven't protected for so long, that we haven't taken care of for so long. Now people are realizing how critical that is. So that's the motivation, I think. And I think we can all feel comfortable in assigning that motivation to everyone, big and small, governments, individuals, people walking along paths in the forest. They all have the same motivation. We don't want to see this disappear. So we ask ourselves, how can we make a difference? How can we do things a little differently than what we did before? And one of the things that's critical, I think, for all of us, no matter what size we are, is to say that we did things in the past in a way that didn't recognize where some of the true knowledge and some of the true paths, as Niyanta said earlier, lie. And that is with the community, right? So we're saying that indigenous communities, steward communities, the communities that are on the ground doing this conservation work, that are the primary engagement in this conservation, they're the ones that actually are implementing these initiatives that we're all talking about. When we say global conservation, it's them that's on the ground doing these things. So we all, I think, secondary to our desire to conserve, have a desire to assist those communities that are doing this work. But that's where the problem is. So to answer your question, Niyanta, I think we have to go to several different places. We have to look, first we have to say, to Topher's point earlier, there is a uniformity in a lot of these problems. And to quote Jose, there's some models that we can say, hey, this is happening again and again. What can we do? So we're talking about the disconnect between the highest levels of funding, as Barbara mentioned, and the actual projects that are getting done on the ground. So what I want to say is that I see this issue in Suriname. I see it in the Diani region of Kenya. I see it in Europe. I see it in North America. I see it everywhere. I want to reference, there is a small group that is building ecotourism lodges on the beautiful, if you've ever been to Kenya, you've ever seen the beaches, they're amazing. You would want to protect them too, right? And they have a lot of, again, as Niyanta mentioned, a lot of biodiversity. But when we go there, we find out that the very first thing that the folks there do is they begin asking questions. How do I do this? How do I conserve? What are the best practices? And what I'm telling the folks here today is that that question is asked 1,000 times a year, 10,000 times a year. We're hearing that same question. How do I begin? How do I do this? So there's the initial, well, you reach out, as Jose mentioned, to a couple of big NGOs, probably don't get the answer that you want. Then you try and reach out to some other people, and then you reach out maybe to someone like me, like our friends in the Diani region did. They reached out to me, and I did what I could to connect people with individuals on the ground. But the fact is, we're spinning that wheel again and again and again. The individual trying on the ground, the community trying on the ground to get this knowledge, to get this funding, to do what they know must be done, which is to conserve the beauty that they see around them. They're the best people to do it. We know that. We already know that. But they don't have the resources. Why don't they have the resources is what I think we should all be asking ourselves. And what's the solution to that? Well, what we at the Rainforest Collective have joined to do, you've already heard all these, again, these are the best people on the earth that I've got with me in this panel. And they're all giving their time because they recognize that if we don't do something, what's going to happen is these folks on the ground, they're not going to be able to accomplish what they want to accomplish. And how do we change that? Well, so you may hear things like, oh, $10 billion was devoted, or there's $1 trillion in green bonds, these types of things. But I think what we can all do is know that those funds are not making it to the people on the ground. They're not making it to the communities that are implementing these initiatives. So what we've said is, how can we assist that? How can we make that process? Well, just to quote Rainforest Netherlands, they put out a great study that says that, maybe 1 to 1.5% of those dedicated funds make it down to the ground. What can we do to change that? There's a lot of mechanisms, as Jose addressed, for why that's happening. But setting aside talking about it, what can we do to change it? And we think that we've gathered, our organizations all work directly with those communities. So we have some good insights that we share among each other and that we'd like to share with everyone else. So the real purpose that we see going forward is to facilitate not the colonialistic idea that we need to come in and teach communities on the ground how to do what they're trying to do, but that we need to assist. We need to be more like apprentices, right? Because they have the knowledge. We need to do some of the legwork, not the management, some of the legwork, right? So we need to bring in the funds. We need to bring in the tools and not ask so much, but give more. People say, well, how can you be sure that projects are getting done? And all you have to do is ask any of us that actually do work on the ground. They are getting done. And these are earnest people that are working very hard with very small budgets. Topher mentioned earlier about new ways and new paradigms of assessing project worth, especially small projects, because it's not viable for someone at a certain level to look over a project and say, is this being done correctly, right? To use the tools, the sort of antiquated tools that that Barbara mentioned. So I think all of our purpose is to be facilitators, but also outright helpers to these communities, these steward communities, these indigenous communities, these on-the-ground communities who care so much about their homes and their ecosystems. So what I want to mention, I think that's most important, is that if we look all around the world, we see this. I'm happy to, if anybody has anything they want to ask about or any specific region, I know we might take some questions. I'm happy to answer questions about that. But I think the key idea is that now is the time for us to begin to address this on a global scale, and not, again, from top down, but from the communities up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jon, because you know what you're talking about, and you use some beautiful words in the past, that a lot of times when the pledges that are made, somebody makes a very large pledge, they imagine that they're making an impact for whether it's 100 million or $1 billion. That imagined part is really very important. And I think Barbara is going to share the study that Rainforest Foundation Norway had commissioned. And I think anybody that's on this listening, please go read it. Because how is it responsible for anybody to be okay with less than 3%, less than 1% of money actually making it to the ground and creating the impact where it creates the most impact? And if we all know this and we're in on the secret, and we are looking at what we're facing as a planet, as humanity, the planet's going to survive, be here for the next 4 billion years. Are we as humanity going to be here for another 1,000 years? And so if we do, and we say, what is it with the system? So if we talk about it, Jon, you already got us started on this. And these are the questions that we're not the only ones asking, because I know folks in the audience, I know several of the partner organizations for World Rainforest Day have talked about it, that this is an issue. And do we just, watch it, or do we go do something about it? So what will we do? Topher, do you want to go first and talk about what we will do, the platform? Like,
Sure.
How are we going to disrupt this, right?
Okay, so
about.
Yeah, I got it. So I'm excited about this because I'm so excited for the opportunity for there to be people to define impact in the ways that they choose to. Yes, there's a technological platform that allows for this, and it's not just about cutting out the people in the middle. It's about actually not trying to overly standardize the way in which one would define how a project gets done. And I strongly believe there's lots of funders who would at least take parts of what they would like to put into these and be willing to give it directly to people that are on the ground if groups like this group here and the rest of Rainforest Collective are able to vouch for them. You come in here with a track record. It's based upon success, or at least based upon like true sincerity in the work you do. And then the reporting is not required to be so laborious. Ultimately, we get to the point where funders should, from the very top, should have access to people on the ground, because certainly in the work that we've done, we've found that is actually comes at a premium. The ability to get to people on the ground is something that funders really, really want. But in doing so, there's a lot of fanfare and games and reporting and things like this that get in the way of people talking about what's really going on. Because if we're really in a crisis, why is every grant report so rosy about how the outcome was? So I do think that there's an extent to which we need to give people the opportunity to have real conversations about the struggle, real conversations about how things are reported, and understand that this is an ongoing campaign. And Barbara brought up before that you just shouldn't expect that the way that we would write a grant report, perhaps not me, is the same way that people there on the ground would. And I think that's something that funders would be happy to see if we release some of the requirements that they're used to. And that's what this platform, and that's what, frankly, one of the values that I'm very excited to trumpet and see happen.
And so what Topher is talking about is, as part of Rainforest Collective, our goal is to create this platform. Sometimes I call it a distribution system, and we've called it that, and many different things. You know, what do funders ask for? I would like Jose to talk about it, because funders ask for integrity. They want transparency. They want to have impact. They want to be able to measure it. And how much of it is really real, and how do we get around it instead of saying, oh, I spend the $100,000 and I put in the report on how I spend the money, versus what was the real impact created, and how will we try to get around that? And that's something I'd love Jose to be able to speak about.
Yeah, you need this accountability, but now with the AI, it's very easy. It's more easy, no? Now more the information is in the field. I was saying that part, even we are in the past. Now all the information is connected. Most of the information, or areas in this case of Ecuador, SDI, are connected. All the treasure systems of the governments are connected right now. Then it's easier. Then you have to see the quality of the spend. But you have to connect both. You cannot spend all your time in paperwork that doesn't go to the field. Where I was talking, John, everything goes in the paperwork. You are the genius in paperwork. Okay, I would say maybe in the past, because you don't have the tools to show to the donors, to show to the people who give you the resources to see if it's real or not. Now you have drones. Now you have a lot of technology. You have a lot of people saying around, if you do it, or if you do right, or you don't do it. We can use these tools like now and put a lot of people from the community to say, look, how is doing the work, how is doing, and we'll say we have to use new tools to this accountability and to match better, the paperwork with the accounting of each project has to be faster, easier to the field, because what we want is these people who's alive right now to be in the field. It's so expensive for the world to have people like us, the people who's talking right now, and waste their time. It's really, now you have a lot of technology, Topher is here, and a lot of genius guys making a lot of chain work and how to manage faster. And I will say it's time to go to the paperwork almost away. It's very important. But you have ClipU, you have a lot of technology right now, Pentaho with a very good programming people making better impacts in the field. And I was saying that way you can move more money, not to the administration system, but more for the paper, more to go to the field. What the people saying, look, come to me, we have to make it. I will say that's one to be the best thing to do it. Each project right now is almost most of the time paperwork or losing people. You pay or you don't pay. 80% of the time is in paperwork, and 20% goes to the field.
He has a good statistic, better than the ones the report Barbara shared, and I think Reina did as well. Barbara, I've been asked to do the time check. I want you to talk about what does it mean for Rainforest Collective if people wanted to be involved. What would it take? What will you share some things about?
Sure. Thank you, Niyanta. Yes, well, we are definitely looking for people to partner with us, to join the collective and to be part of the movement. I believe somebody put the website on the chat. There's a get involved section, and there's a questionnaire there that interested people can complete and fill out. But we're looking for partner organizations. We're looking to be a multidisciplinary effort. We already are, but people from all sorts of walks of life are welcome. We're looking for individuals that are interested in contributing. And we also are currently recruiting for a volunteer coordinator. I believe there is a posting that will be shared on the chat. So we really would love to hear from any and all of you that are interested in joining this movement.
John, if you were to, I've heard you talk about it. If you were to say, what is collective in about 2 sentences, I know I'm putting you on the spot now. Well, how would you do the 2 sentences? Okay, I'll let you have 3 or 4.
That third one is really key. The main thing about the collective is that we're sharing knowledge, sharing motivation, and as you mentioned earlier, we have various areas of expertise, various portfolios, and these together with our very unified motivation create a lot of ability to do good. And I think that is the most important thing about the collective. We're all motivated by a common vision, and we have different ways to approach it. We have different capabilities, but if you were to add us all together, all the possibilities together, they multiply each time a person comes to us. Each time someone joins the collective, we have more things that we can do and more possibilities. So please, as the others have said, please do go to the website, read, and if you're interested, send us a communication.
So what I'd like to do is ask if there was a question or 2. I know we won't have that much time, but there's something I want to share, and that is, creating something new takes focus, attention, and time and effort. And I have to say that this group has come together to do that. And we've actually gone and met for a retreat. If anybody wanted to really know how serious we are, we spent 2.5 days in a retreat about a year ago to map out what it looks like. I've said this before, time is our most valuable, non-renewable resource. What would compel us to do this? Because we've got to find time to continue doing the work we have to do with our respective organizations. And we're certainly looking for folks who really want to roll up their sleeves and help do that, sort of continue doing the hard work. And then we're also looking for partners that would actually join us, because not everybody can do this. And we understand that. But it is about moving the needle when we've seen this problem, and we've heard from many of you. So if I don't have a question, I'm going to continue with this group because, okay. I'm trying to decide who should get this question. This is a good question. I'll let Barbara, you go. What is one of the most important things that funders should know to help get more funds to the ground?
And I would invite anybody to chime in. I think maybe the questions we can answer as a group.
There's one more as well, and I'd like Topher to answer the second question. Part of it is that we did a lot of review and looked at a lot of what's going out between us. We know a lot of people, right? So we've spoken to many. Go on, Barbara, you go, and then Topher, in the interest of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the themes that we've touched upon that John put in high relief is the issue of trust and the lack thereof, that sometimes the very onerous reporting requirements put on the communities on the ground. And so for me, I think it's all about trust and building those direct relationships and seeing it for yourself and seeing that commitment that communities have and the spirit of perseverance and of just doing it for nature and for conservation. So I think the more that we, as a field of conservation can remove barriers to create that trust and as much direct relationships as possible, I think that would achieve that. And I think that's sort of what we're trying to do through Rainforest Collective in an efficient and effective way.
Topher, do you want to answer the question about the platform? And we've spent a lot of time looking at blockchain, looking at sort of normal ways of doing things. And so I'd like Topher to answer this question. Is there already a platform to help bridge the gap between those doing the work on the ground and those providing the funding? And you might get somebody to help you, Topher. So
sure. And by the way, and Barbara was out there letting people know that there's room for help. That's definitely true on technology side. We would love to work with some people here. Ultimately, what we're the first proof of concept for this is one that we intend to demonstrate over the next few months, certainly before the last quarter of the year, which is about getting funding to certain groups on the ground and then being able to report on it without some of these, and then defining what reporting is. The truth about technology on this is that the proof of concept for this does not require tremendous technical lift, right? It's about the networks, but it has to work. And it is true that we could engineer all this from the front, but I'm having worked in the field a lot, as I'm sure many of you have too, it makes a lot more sense to build it and then figure out what you really need and what the people there on the ground really need. And so that's what we intend to demonstrate with some great funds and some feedback over the next few months heading into the fourth quarter. Please join us because, again, the most impactful things are not always the shiniest. They just show you the most impact.
Yes, and this is about changing. I'm going to say it. It is about, we're talking about changing the trajectory. We don't have to do it for all the money, but we do it for a fraction. That fraction is a huge amount, and we're talking about the difference $5,000 to $50,000 can make at community level. We're talking about under $5 million projects. What do they do? And how?
And what's more institutional than the flow of money? It's very, very, it's gate kept in all sorts of ways. So yeah, we're looking for some innovation in ways that we can get funding from the people who are willing to give it, people on the ground who are willing to spend it wisely and report on it. And there's a lot of room for new ideas there, especially across international lines.
And I think that's been the case. We've had a lot of people asking, they're searching, but perhaps, and we know they don't have the time, and so somebody's going to go and do this, right? So, Jon, you were about to say something. I know we're about time, but Jon, any final words for everybody? I'll give like 30 seconds each.
Just that, we are out of time, but what everybody said here today is key. Engagement is what we need. And so, come in and interact with us and work with us and provide your expertise to us and let's get started. If you really want to do something, and I know everyone here does, this is one way to do it. So we'd love to see you.
Barbara, so here's my thing. There are 145 countries that have said we're going to end deforestation by 2030. I want to see a path and a plan, and it's going to need several of us coming up with those pathways and plans. That's the invitation to join us to be one of the ones we've been waiting for. So Barbara?
No, just thank you, Niyanta, for bringing us together, for being that visionary and that glue that, makes the collective stick. And I'm excited for the future. So thank you.
Jose?
No, thanks, Niyanta, for this talking to the community. One thing I want to say is that more than 12% of our body loves to help the people with nonprofit, and now everybody wants to give something and help something in some way. Most of the countries in the world, most of the development countries in the world, they have at least 10% of the people who can work in NGOs, and the resources goes to these groups. In that way, you can develop the countries and develop and protect the forest. Normally, if you need the NGOs, one says, okay, take away the river, and the other NGO has to say, don't take the river out, and then it comes to talk. And we need that kind of people. We need that kind of people. That's the way that the people works, that the world works. and I think we can make it faster. Thanks, Niyanta, for the invitation.
Thank you so much to our audience, not just the ones watching today, but the ones that are going to be watching in the future. We know World Rainforest Day, 24-hour, international timeline to timeline. There are people we will miss. And so thank you for joining us. And I really want to thank Topher, Barbara, Jon, and Jose. And thank you, Nia, very much.
Shout out to Nia. Thank you.